Hi there, this is Josh. I just wanted to share with you books that I read during the third quarter of the year, months of July, August, and September. Primarily August and September because July was pretty much a month where I read the material for Literary Gladiators, many of which were short stories and poems. I did, however, read Macbeth in July, and I think that's probably my favorite Shakespeare play. Shakespeare's not my favorite writer, but there are works that he really demonstrated his master of the written word. And I think that Macbeth was very strong in character development. Alrighty then. In August, I read 4 books. The first one I read was 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. Clarke is a master in science fiction, and that can be seen in here. I thought it was good, not great. I wish that Hal had a bit more of a presence. That's what I came into the novel thinking. But I really liked how Clarke touched up on on humanity and how, in the prehistoric sense, they picked up their urge for power, and how just looking 30 some odd years into the future in which this novel was written, that we get a lot of that futuristic sense of what are things going to be like, and to make it so close in the future makes it pretty creepy. I gave this 8 out of 10, and I did a collaboration with Catherine, who was formerly one half of On the Read, which she did with her friend Shannon Rose Reads. I'll leave a link to that collaboration. Next book I read was The Fall by Albert Camus. Most of you know of The Stranger, which Camus wrote. And in all honesty, I think that The Stranger was the better novel. I read The Plague, I thought that was okay. The Fall, I thought was okay as well, which has to do with a lawyer from Paris, Jean-Baptiste Clements, who is being put under speculation of misdeeds, and this has to do completely with his testimony and what he has to say. It's very philosophical. It's pretty much the ideas that are flowing within existentialism. But if you're looking for something extraordinary by Camus, I suggest The Stranger. This is definitely not a good place to start with him. I gave it 6 out of 10 because it was still it was pretty decent brain candy. Next book I read was Thomas Jefferson: The Art of Power by John Meacham, and I really enjoyed this one. I thought that Meacham did a very good job staying objective to the legacy of Thomas Jefferson, who was indeed an extraordinary man, a Renaissance man with many interests, and that really shaped America, even though he was not the greatest governor of Virginia, and he preached keeping power away from the executive branch, but exercised it on many occasions, but notably with the Louisiana Purchase in the early 19th century, which really increased the size of the United States. But these executive decisions were pretty popular among the people, and it got him reelected for a second term. And it also talks about the interesting tidbits of information, such as his invention of the swivel chair and the dumbwaiter. Even though he was not a believer in the patent. I gave this a perfect 10 out of 10 because I think that Meacham did an excellent job capturing who Jefferson was, not only as a historical figure, but also as a person. Next book I read, we went over on Literary Gladiators, but I decided to reread it on my own. Watchmen by Alan Moore, which is deemed an extraordinary graphic novel, and I most certainly agree with the fact that Moore did an excellent job capturing the image of a flawed hero in the, whether it be in the physical sense, like Dr. Manhattan and what happened to him, or the more emotional, mental sense that Rorschach had to endure. And then there was the idea of the anti-hero, but more so in the way that just about anybody should not like him. And with that, I'm talking about the comedian. I thought Watchmen was a good read. I gave it an 8 out of 10. And I think that for me not being a graphic novel person, I enjoyed reading this. For the month of September, I engaged in a Nobel Prize Nominee Month. I'll leave a link down below to the list that I referred to. But it's, I'm referring to individuals that have their names thrown around for the upcoming award of the Nobel Prize in Literature, which it's going to be awarded in a few days. They're already awarding the other Nobel Prizes, chemistry, physics. They end with peace, which is probably the most notable. But the first one I read was Voices from Chernobyl by Svetlana Alexievich, which has to do with accounts from individuals that dealt with the nuclear disaster known as Chernobyl in 1986. Alexievich is a journalist, and she does a great job capturing the things that these people had to go through. Many of the accounts were random and casual, but a lot of them were really saddening and tragic. But at the same time, it was just so... It just really sparked an impression. What not only the people here and now had to go through, but those that were... There were women that were pregnant during this time, and they came into contact and produced these deformed babies, a lot of which didn't survive. This really is a noteworthy account, and I gave it a perfect 10 out of 10. Next one I read was perhaps the greatest poetry collection that I've ever come across thus far. Most of the poetry collections I own are just collected works, selected works, or the complete collections, but this one is just 3 small collections in one, and it's This Side of Time by Ko Un. What he can do in one sentence or one stanza is just amazing. He was a Korean political protester who saw time in prison, but has since picked up his freedom, and he has this quiet strength to him. I'll read you some of his poems because they're relatively short. They're split into 3 parts, 2 of which, only the last one do the poems have names. But here's one of my favorites. The autumn leaves fall dancing. I'll dance my way out too when it's time to leave this world. Quite amazing what he can do, and the way that he connects nature and humanity, the fact that there really is not much that is different between the two. I just think it's quite something. What he can do in one sentence. Here's an example. There's a poem called Father. Food in his kid's mouth, that's nirvana. Just the idea that family mentality is just, he hits the nail right on the head, and I definitely think that he does that with just about anything he puts his hands on, whatever he takes his pen to. I think that this collection is definitely brilliant, and I really think that Ko-un should be highly considered for the Nobel Prize in Literature, as he has been so many times. Perfect 10 out of 10. Next two books I thought were just okay. They're Goodbye Columbus. This is Philip Roth's first release. It was released with 5 shorter stories. I felt that the way that he writes is just outstanding, and I think that his characters are interesting individuals. I just feel that in Goodbye Columbus it was very rushed and almost very cookie cutout sitcom-esque. I just thought it went too quickly. I think in some cases things like that go quickly, but it's not so ideal. I thought that 2 of his short stories, Conversion of the Jews and Epstein, were pretty comical and interesting. But if I were to average out the 5 short stories and the major novella Goodbye Columbus, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. I thought it was okay. And the last thing I completed was A Grain of Wheat by Ngugi wa Thiong'o, which has to do with the struggles of 1950s Kenya and just different things that were going on during that time. Mugo being the person people looked up to, but yet he was a flawed individual, and another major story about 2 best friends. The other one ends up sleeping with the other one's wife while he is in detention, which is imprisonment, the style of the similar to the way that the Soviet gulags were. But I wish that the character development in this one was a bit better. I wish that we had a bit more of a background and that there was a bit more meat to it. I like the way that I had a sense of the intensity of the times, but I thought it could have been better the way that the struggles were handled, and that there was more of a background so that we felt more. I gave it 6 out of 10. And what I'm currently reading is also from Nobel Prize nominee Joyce Carol Oates' Wild Nights, which has to do with the last days of Edgar Allan Poe, Emily Dickinson, Mark Twain, Henry James, and Ernest Hemingway. At the moment, I'm not liking it as much, but I finished the first 2 and am currently on the story about Mark Twain and when he was part of the when he set up the Angelfish, which had to do with his attraction to girls between the ages of 10 and 16, which at that time 10 was the age of consent, so they were seen as adults, which I don't know what people would think, but from what I read up on, the Twain story seems to be the one that is directly similar to what he was going through at that period of time. The Emily Dickinson mentality was quite similar as well. The Edgar Allan Poe one I wasn't very fond of. It had to do with diary submissions of him after his death, but it just wasn't for me. Alrighty. This is everything I've read during the last 2 months. There's a little stack of it. And I also wanted to mention my thoughts about the upcoming Nobel Prize in Literature. I would like to see Ko-un win it the most. But I also think that Haruki Murakami is deserving, and so is Svetlana Alexievich. But we'll just have to see what happens. Thank you for checking this out. And for now, keep reading.